Hi, and welcome to the Smarter Literacy Podcast from Ascend Smarter Intervention, where our mission is to simplify effective literacy instruction to make teaching literacy easier and more accessible for everyone. I'm your host, Lindsey, and in today's episode, I'm joined by Natalie, who's the co-founder of Hidden Key Literacy Specialists on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, Australia. Natalie's path to literacy intervention was anything but traditional. She started her career as a lawyer before realizing her true passion was helping children learn how to read and thrive. Since then, she's built a one-of-a-kind learning studio filled with movement, sensory play, and connection. Think mini trampolines, obstacle courses, and even cave reading sessions under the table. Her focus is on creating safe, joyful spaces for students. And this has transformed not just how they learn, but how they feel about learning. In this episode, Natalie shares how she has made the leap from law to literacy, the challenges she faced bringing the science of reading into practice, and why she believes confidence and connection are just as important as decoding and fluency. She also offers thoughtful insights for anyone thinking about stepping into private practice or redefining what literacy intervention can look like. So settle in and get ready for this inspiring conversation with Natalie. So, Natalie, let's get started. And how about we have you tell us a little bit about yourself, your setting, how long you've been there, the students you serve, anything like that.
Sure. My journey has been a little bit unique, but I think most literacy intervention specialists would probably have a similar story. But I started off as a lawyer, was a lawyer for quite a long time, and then I had kids and my world turned upside down. I decided I wanted to do something that was a bit more rewarding and fulfilling. So I went back to uni and did my master's in education. And in Australia, we have to choose a specialization. So given obviously being a lawyer, it made sense for me to look at English and literacy. My first job while I was still at uni was doing intervention in a school. So it kind of sparked a passion for me, but it became really apparent how much of a gap there was between the kids who were struggling and what was being taught in the classrooms and the load on the teachers and their inability to actually help the kids one-on-one. So by the time that I'd finished my master's and I'd delved a bit more into the science of literacy and done a few extra qualifications along the way, it just made sense that I was being drawn to working one-on-one with kids to help bridge that gap. So I work in a studio by myself in Caloundra on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland. I have a studio that promotes movement. So we've got mini tramps, we've got things for kids to do, obstacle courses, sensory toys, a lounge, different types of chairs, a big whiteboard table. So it's not a traditional classroom setting. Students arrive straight away, they've got the choice shoes on, shoes off. Are we going to be moving around? We always start with a game. So it really does make them open to the learning experience. And I'm huge on building connection with them. So I've become their safe space. And by having that safe space and having them happy and actually looking forward to coming, they're really open to learning.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. Oh my gosh, just thinking about like an obstacle course where I'm also learning and playing, and you're right. And absolutely. We have a previous episode where we kind of talked about creating safe spaces for kids and
Yeah.
creating a space where learning is fun and not something that is they dread, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Like I had a student last week and we literally were sitting on the floor under the table using whiteboards because that's what they wanted to do and that's fine. So
Yeah.
by me getting on the ground with them and making it a bit fun and we were sitting in a cave, all of a sudden they wanted to listen to what I had to say and they were engaged. So
Yeah.
if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. But that's the beauty of having my own space, not having to micromanage behaviors in the classroom. It's just me and the student for that hour of undivided attention.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. So for the next question, talk about the initial challenges that you faced when you first started in your field.
Initially, my biggest challenge was that the science of literacy was still quite new. So, schools weren't really catching up on, I guess, the new way to educate. So, there was a little bit of pushback, I think. And I found it to be very much a top-down problem. So, while teachers were quite open, the education system itself can be quite systematic. So there was that little bit of push and pull there. I think my biggest struggle or challenge now as a specialist is that children are taking time out of class to come and see me. So some parents can be concerned, some schools can be concerned, but essentially what people who have been through it can attest to is that hour one-on-one that I can have with a student each week is going to be worth 10 hours, obviously exaggerating, but what I can achieve in 1 hour one-on-one, most students aren't getting that in the traditional classroom setting. So if a student is truly falling behind and struggling, them sitting in a classroom setting is not going to get them to where they need to be. So by sacrificing that hour a week out of their traditional classroom time, generally within a term or two, I can help them catch up so that it's going to level the playing field for them. So that would probably be the biggest struggle that I would have in my setting.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I won't say it's good to hear that you're also struggling with that, but it's kind of reassuring that that is something that you guys are facing also in Australia, because I know here in the US that is something that we find difficult also in our
Yeah.
classrooms too, is finding that appropriate time and space and also the top-down approach, right? Where some teachers might be open, but we've kind of have to work to get the instruction that's going to work for our kids into the
Yeah.
school. And it's getting better. We definitely have kind of, I know when I started my literacy master's program as well, we were smack dab in the middle of the reading wars. And, it was very divided. Either you did it this way or you did it this way. And yeah, it was hard, especially like going from graduate school where I was learning very particular in reading the different research that really
Yeah.
focused more on the science of reading, but then entering those school systems where I wasn't seeing that happening. So yeah, I can see how I that would have been like a struggle in that beginning.
Yeah. And I think, if there's a message that I could give to teachers from my point of view, is I think teachers who haven't had much exposure to science of literacy, I think sometimes can maybe feel a little bit defensive. Like a student coming to see me is a reflection on them and their teaching, but it truly isn't. Like anyone who works in our industry understands the workload on teachers is huge, and it is literally impossible for them to have the time to sit down and do what it is that I do with their students. So if a student is being pulled out of your class and brought to me, it is by no means a reflection on you or your teaching. It's simply me backing you up. So I really like a collaborative relationship with teachers so that if they're open to it, I can say to them, what is it that you're actually teaching in class at the moment? So when I'm doing my teaching, I can help support you and back you up. It really should be collaborative. It's not a me versus you.
Exactly, exactly. And education in general should always be collaborative because it
Yeah.
should always be about helping the kids. So I love that. Thank
Yeah.
you. Awesome. So you kind of started talking about this when we started talking about those initial challenges, and you kind of started describing a little bit how you started to overcome those challenges. Do you still feel like you're facing any of those challenges currently, or has it gotten better?
Look, it definitely has improved. And I think it's a sign of the times in the sense of a lot of my students have additional needs. So
Mhm.
I have two children myself, both have additional needs. And I have learned from my personal experience, you need to be able to take them to OTs, speech pathologists. So taking them out of school for specialist appointments, I think parents are becoming a bit more familiar with that process. And while not all of my students have additional needs, most of them do.
Mhm.
So the parents that are bringing them to me are also then taking them out of school for those OTs, speechies. So I think that that is helping a little bit that we are being recognized as one of the specialists and we're being given a bit more credit for how
Yeah.
we can actually contribute to their educational journey.
Absolutely. I think we are seeing that in our clinic as well. We definitely have more parents coming to us and even just asking our advice or what can I do to bring this back to the classroom? Can I have you connect with their teacher? And
Yes.
always yes, right? Like again, that
Yeah.
collaboration piece is huge. Awesome. So this next question I think is going to be very interesting to our listeners because I know that we have quite a few listeners who are looking at that kind of private practice. How is
Yeah.
it different from being like a teacher in the school system?
Mm.
So the question is, what does a typical day look like for you?
The best part is that I don't have to answer to anybody. I can set my own hours. So if there is somebody who's thinking of going out on their own, it is brilliant because you have control of how much or how little or what days you really can achieve work-life balance. In saying that, it's hard to set boundaries sometimes and stick to it. But a general day for me is I'll see my first student at 7 a.m. I will see students back to back, and I will go either until 3 o'clock so I can pick my daughter up from school and take her to tennis and all of the after school activities. Or I can go all the way through till 5 o'clock if it's a day that they've got something else on, or my husband can help out. So it is fantastic that I can pick and choose because obviously I'm at a stage in my life where I have a 9 and 11-year-old child. So I need to be able to be present for them, but still have that time where I'm able to help students. And I think that my biggest concern when I was starting was how am I going to only work around their school hours? But being that parents are willing to bring them to me during the school day, I'm seeing students literally back to back. So I have a range of mostly intervention students that come in. So we're putting them on evidence-based programs.
Hmm.
But then I've got a lot of kids that will come in for general tuition, students who have completed their programs but wanting to just come in for that homework support. We kind of use the language that I'm their secret weapon. So it gives them confidence throughout the week that if there's something that they're not understanding, they can jot it down in their diary and bring it into me and be like, Natalie, help me. I don't understand. And they feel comfortable to do that because we've built that rapport over the duration of, the previous terms that they've worked with me. So it is really varied, but the biggest benefit is that I get to control how I teach, what I teach, and I don't have to stick to any specified plan because everything is tailored to the individual needs of the student. So I'm not having all of the extra stuff that's put onto teachers. I am purely focusing on each student for each hour that I have them. So that would be my favorite part of the job.
I love that. And I think so many people are starting to look at the careers like that. I don't know about in Australia, but I know here in the US, there's more and more teacher burnout
A
where,
100%, the exact same
yes,
problem.
yeah, and it is, I mean, I was obviously in the classroom at one point and while I wasn't burned out, I could see how people were feeling burned out. And it comes back to what you were kind of saying, that lack of choice is a big deal. I was lucky enough to be in a school system where I did have a lot of say, but there were still some things that I couldn't do. And it just didn't sit right with me. And since moving into private practice, I haven't felt that way. So the next question that I have for you is, so you talked about what a typical day looks like for you now. How has that changed since like when you first got into your private practice? What did it look like?
I think I'm a bit more confident in my individualized approaches. So I think coming from teacher settings, you're so used to having to comply with 1,000 rules. Like every teacher knows that classrooms are mostly going to be, behavior management, but all of
Hmm.
the extra bits and pieces and the reporting and the paperwork. So I think it took a little bit of adjusting to realize that I don't need all of the extras. It truly has come down to the fundamentals and focusing on the kids. So
Yeah.
the way that it's changed is probably just my confidence in my ability to just show up for the kids. And probably I originally thought it would be purely more of just the literacy intervention, but I think my business has grown quite organically. So, for example, I found that a lot of my students were really struggling with things like their short-term working memory. So I decided to research how I could further help them. So now I'm also a qualified cogmed coach. So there's online brain training programs that I can offer the students if it's something that they're struggling with. As you know, I have designed and manufactured some other products that help kids as well. So a lot of them are really struggling with their self-esteem or
Hmm.
establishing really deep and meaningful connections with people in their lives. So I teamed up with a clinical psychologist to be able to design some products to target those areas. So I think trusting in myself and my instincts from working with students and finding out what it is that they need and then trying to find the solutions. So I think growing in ways that I would not have ever imagined is probably the biggest difference now compared to when I first started.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And your products are wonderful.
Oh,
We
thank you.
oh, we enjoyed love like looking through them and getting to see they're beautiful. And I love that. I love that you're talking about confidence in yourself and feeling, again, I have to agree that kind of moving to private practice, all that other stuff kind of gets taken out of the
Yeah.
picture, and you really do just get to focus on the kids, and it's awesome. Yeah, and I love that your space is a space also that the kids get to work on that confidence or whatever it really is might be a hurdle for them besides the academics, right? We talk a lot about executive functioning in our clinic, and I know some of my students when especially when they're starting with me and I'm getting to know them. Sometimes, yes, there's an academic barrier there. Many of our students have dyslexia, ADHD, autism sometimes as well. And so that is a hurdle that they have to get over. But sometimes it's this confidence, this lack of confidence in themselves. Sometimes it's feeling like this is hard and I can't do hard things. And it's like, no, you can, and I'm going to show you
Yeah.
how, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's what it comes back to. I said at the beginning of our conversation about creating that safe space where kids are allowed to be themselves. So even those really little things, like when they get to the door, they straight away choose other shoes on or shoes off. And that to them signifies that they have choice from the very
Hmm.
beginning. So, how are they most comfortable? Where do they want to sit? What type of chair do they want to sit on? Are they going to
Hmm.
sit on the couch? Are they going to sit on the floor? I can teach them what they need to be taught, but they need to be open to the experience. They need to be having fun because at the end of the day, they are kids. And I
Yeah.
feel like there is so much pressure on kids today that I need to take all of that away. And by doing that, I'm building up their confidence so that if
Yeah.
I can make them feel that when they leave my studio, they're empowered, they can take some of that back into the classroom. So, another thing that I think helps build their confidence, obviously, the products that I mentioned that I made, but doing things that they can take back to the classroom with them. So, little things like a lot of my students, get the confusions with the B's and the D's. So, you teach them the hand trick so that they can sit there, but I show them put your hands in your lap, nobody has to see, make the fist, but so things like that. If it's in maths, teaching them, okay, well, let's draw out your strategies and get them to practice so that they can take it back to the classroom. So I will then translate that to the parents, let them know the language that I've used so that they can support that transition as well, because it's great that they can come to me and be doing great with me. But I want them to take everything back to the classroom and have success there as well, because I think that's where their confidence will truly flourish.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We definitely want them obviously to apply the literacy skills that we're teaching them in the classroom, but I think you're right. Applying those strategies, we can teach them to be successful and in ways that can be successful. Like I love that it can be in your lap. No one has to see, right?
Yeah.
Because kids are very self-conscious, and especially when it means that they're like kind of different from their classmates, then they don't want to do it. Like the C pen, right? I have students who have C
Yeah.
pen but do not want to use it in the classroom because it's very noticeable. And I get that. I get that. So we work on strategies too of like,
Yeah.
how can we still use this tool and make it effective for you, but also make it so you're comfortable using it.
And look, kids aren't given enough credit for how observant they are and how smart they are in
Hmm.
general. Let's be honest, if a student's coming to you or I, it's because they're struggling academically. So we can't expect them to just remember things, recite things. That's not the way that their brain works. So
Yeah,
I spend a lot of time explaining to them how it is their brain works and why the way I'm going to teach them is going to be different. And it's a good thing because it means they're going to be successful. And you don't actually have to remember things. Let's use a different strategy. And this is how it's going to best help you. So I think that some people might not give them enough credit and say, you'll be great. You just need to remember this. They know that they're not the smartest kid in the class. They know that learning is difficult. So I think by even acknowledging that and saying, let's actually use your other strengths so that you can be successful, it makes them feel like, okay, well, you're being honest with me. You're not
hmm.
lying to me. And then they're going to have more respect and pay attention to what it is we're trying to teach them.
Exactly. Exactly. I just love that. Could talk to you all day about this. So, our next question is, again, I think you've kind of started talking about this, but we would love to know what is working really well for you currently? What's the thing that you would say is the working the best for you?
One-on-one, definitely.
Yes.
But multisensory learning obviously is huge. So activating those different parts of the brain gives them that higher chance of remembering because they're not just learning a sound or a letter or a visual by connecting all of the dots and firing up all those different neurons in the brain at the same time. It is an absolute game changer. So I know that a lot of schools in the last few years have really got on board with multisensory teaching, but 99.9% of everything that I do takes that approach. So that would be the biggest thing that I could say is working really, really well.
Amazing. Absolutely. Like you said, it's different form of learning, but that's not a bad thing because
No.
so much of school is still really designed like that old factory model where we just teach, the kids in one kind of way and
Yeah.
yeah, and
Oh,
expect all of
and
them, right?
yeah, and look, I'm very much of the opinion that, there's always going to be those naturally gifted learners.
Right.
But why not just teach everything in the way that is going to reach the most kids? So you might be someone who picks something up really quickly, but is it really going to cause an issue if you're teaching the class in a multisensory fashion to help those kids that struggle to learn that little bit more?
Right.
The other kids are still going to be getting it, but you're going to collect more of those like sort of lower struggling students along the way. So for me, it makes sense. But once again, I think it's people still trying to get on board and educate themselves. And it can be hard to change because that means time and adjustments with everything else people are trying to get done in their workday as well. But look,
Right.
I think that is end goal for everyone.
Right. Yes. Awesome. Natalie, what is next for you? What's next in your kind of like your journey?
Look, given what's happened in the last few years, I'll be honest, I really don't know. I'm just going to continue to be led. I'm really passionate about working with kids and helping them and making a difference. But with everything else that has sort of happened with my business in the last few years, I really just want to continue to be led by the needs of the students. So I've only recently released these new products. So we've got the conversation tower, the conversation cards. I've got a confidence code program. So I'm really trying to help children in all aspects of their learning journeys. As you
Yeah.
mentioned, I think executive functioning is something that people are starting to get on board with a lot more now and understanding the role that it plays in a child's learning experience as well. So, and I think it's not just executive function in terms of organizational skills, it's that emotional recognition, regulation of emotions, and also recognizing that yes, there's a lot of diagnosis in today's society, but I think that now there's almost a stigma, whereas it used to be, I don't want the stigma of a label. I feel like now people are thinking that everyone's just so quick to slap a label on a child, whether it's a learning disability like dyslexia, autism, ADHD. But the fact of the matter is that people are becoming more educated. So diagnosis is obviously going up in turn, but these are real things. So
Mhm.
if your child is struggling with something like ADHD or they have dyslexia, I feel like it's really important to understand that the role that it plays on the way that their brain works. So these are barriers that no matter how much tutoring you give them, no matter how much you get them to try and read or you make them follow a checklist, their brain works differently. And I
Yeah.
think that if you're neurotypical yourself, having a neurotypical, neurodiverse child, it can be really frustrating if you don't understand those markers. And I think that teachers are recognizing those needs as well because they're with kids all day, every day. So
Yeah.
I think understanding the role that executive functioning plays in a child's learning journey is incredibly important. And I want to continue to be led by that in my business and do what I can to be able to help.
Oh my gosh. I love yes. I know I keep saying that, but I do. I really do.
Yeah.
I mean, you're right, because there is the executive functioning. We think about that in the sense of organizing. But just, I mean, recently I had a new student start with me and it became very clear. Yes, there was the struggle with his academics, his learning. Really, his issue is his accuracy is 100%, but his processing speed is very low. Really what the big problem for him was he literally would say to me, I'm not smart enough for this. And it was very clear there was emotional pieces in there.
Hmm.
He would kind of he was fighting to even come to the clinic and see me. He was very, you could tell, frustrated and even a bit embarrassed and just thinking, I mean, he's only a second grader, but he was already basically telling me, what's the point of doing this? I'm not smart enough to do this.
Yeah.
And, luckily I was able to kind of stop our session and have a conversation with him and talk to him about it is nothing about intelligence. Like, you can do this. You've shown me you
Yeah.
can do this. I'm like, I know this is hard, and I know there are other things going on in your life right now where this maybe doesn't seem like the most important thing, but you and I are going to work through it together.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening was I had more of a conversation with his mom about what I was noticing, and I knew he had been seeing a counselor for other reasons. And so I kind of asked her, is his counselor working at all on executive functioning? I'm like, I'm definitely gonna be working on it
Yeah.
here, and she said, no, I hadn't really talked to him about that. And she's been homeschooling him in his other
Yeah.
courses. And
Yeah.
she said, I've been noticing a lot of resistance too. She's like, I'll bring it up. Well, the next time she came in, she said, thank you so much for bringing up the executive functioning piece. I talked to his counselor. This is what we're working on. And it was like there was a whole new kid
It's a
who,
game changer,
yes,
right? It
yeah.
really is. And look, I have had a few parents over the last maybe couple of months have conversations with me about, for example, is it worth getting your child diagnosed, whether it be for a learning disability or otherwise? And I know that it's sort of an on-trend thing that a lot of adults are being diagnosed later in life, but everyone who has said this would have changed my life throughout my educational experience. And I sort of say to them, there's two sides to it. One, especially early intervention is key, but you don't need a diagnosis for that. But I'm not sure how it works in the States, but in Australia, if you have a diagnosis here, the school will make accommodations to be able to help. For example, a child with dyslexia, they get extra time to be able to complete their assessments. The way that it can be formatted can be segmented to help them with their tracking. The font sizes can be different. So there are things that can be done in primary school. And I think it's incredibly important to get it done at that point so that when they move into high school, there's already plans in place and it's a
Mhm.
simple, let's just follow on with what we've been doing. But bigger than that, I see such a change in students when they find out that there is a reason why they're struggling. So a lot of them, I mean, parents can be concerned that they will use it against them or use it as an excuse to be lazy, but I haven't seen a single child react in that fashion. My daughter has dyslexia, and for her, it was incredibly empowering because she's like, okay, it's not that I'm stupid, it's that my brain works differently. I'm going to use these other strategies, and it is going to take me a longer, but that's okay. And she understands why. Otherwise, it's incredibly frustrating when you're sitting there trying to do something and you can't, and you're like, why can't I just be like everyone else?
Yeah.
This is their answer. And I think there was a really big aha moment for me as a parent. My son was diagnosed with autism, and he had always said to me, Mum, I'm not like everyone else. And I'm like, mate, we all feel like that sometimes. But the day that the pediatrician said to him, you have something called autism, and this explains the way that your brain works, he's like, oh, finally, someone understands me. And that moment, I literally had chills. It was incredible for me to see the relief that he felt in understanding that there's a word that explains why his brain works the way that it does.
Yes.
So, from a parent point of view, I've seen it in my own children that it is truly empowering. And I think that's my biggest concern that I raised earlier. There's such a stigma about labels at the moment being a negative thing, but it's not. It's just empowering kids to accept who they are. Once they know who they are, how their brain works, they can harness their strengths to be able to, improve their weaknesses. But
Mhm.
I feel like we're moving in the right direction, but we're not quite there yet.
I couldn't agree more. I do believe that, again, having that label, like you said, it's empowering. I've had students, actually, when I was in the public school system, I had one student in particular, and he did not have a diagnosis of dyslexia, but it was very clear that that's what he had. As a public school teacher, I could not diagnose him as
Yeah.
having dyslexia, at least not in New York State. And when I brought up to our IEP team that I wanted to mention it to his parents, I was told I couldn't. I was
Yeah.
not allowed to say the D word
Yeah.
because they're like, well, if they want to pursue testing, like, we're going to have to pay for that. And I said, okay, I understand, but like, I still think it would be good to know. And they even brought up like, well, would you do anything different? And I said, no, he is receiving the treatment that he needs, but I think he deserves to know
Yeah.
the reason he struggles is
Yeah.
not him. It's not because of anything he's doing.
Yeah.
And so that was a fight that I had on my hand. And then even just recently, I have a student who she's in fifth grade now and just got the dyslexia diagnosis last year. And she said herself, I wish I had known this sooner. I
Yeah.
had told my teachers previously, like, I really struggle with this and this. And they said, oh, you'll just outgrow it. And now she's like, but it feels so good to know that there's a
Yeah.
reason for that. So,
But see, this is yet again another reason for anybody who's listening, who's thinking, do I stay in the classroom? Do I go into my own intervention business? You've got the freedom to be able to have those open discussions with parents.
right.
If they're bringing their child to you, they already know that their child is struggling. And I think that there's almost an unspoken expectation of, look, if you see anything that you have concerns about, you can raise it. You're not dictated by the paperwork, the legislation, all of the political issues that can be attached to it. At the end of the day, if there's a concern that I have, you obviously still need to be very sensitive in the way that you approach it with a parent. But if you see that there's a barrier or a hurdle that a student's having that is more than just academics, it's something that you can more freely speak about as well.
Yes, absolutely. And it does feel good. It feels good for
Yeah,
you, for the kid, everyone, parents.
absolutely.
Awesome. Is there any other pieces of advice that you would like to give our listeners before we kind of wrap up here?
Um, I think, you mentioned before about people who may be umming and ahhing. Should they go into intervention themselves, start their own business? Obviously, I'm in Australia, so I don't know what the climate is like over there. It was great coming to Denver and meet you guys. But for me, it has been the best thing that I have ever done. It's scary starting any new venture, but it is so rewarding and so fulfilling. And even the days where you wake up and you're like, oh, work today. By the time that I'm at work, I'm loving every second of it. I leave and my heart is full, with my buckets filled, all of the
Yes.
good things. I'm making a difference. And I think as well, a little factor that may help push them in the right direction is that you're also working with parents who are incredibly supportive. I know that a lot of teachers feel really underappreciated in the classroom. The expectations from parents can sometimes be a little bit unrealistic. But when you're dealing with parents who are proactive and are bringing their child, especially out of school to bring them to you, they're singing your praises constantly because they can see that their kid is happy, their kid is thriving. So you're getting the rewards from the child, you're getting praise from parents. It's just a really positive, happy experience. So definitely, if you're thinking about it, do it. It's the best thing that I've ever done.
Oh, thank you so much, Natalie. And last but not least, where can listeners contact you or kind of find you after the show?
Yeah, sure. So I'm on Facebook and Instagram. So my business is Hidden Key Literacy Specialists. And if you're interested in any of the products that I've designed with clinical psychologists, it's Hidden Key Creations. So we've got the conversation tower and the conversation card. So the tower is essentially the conversation starters on a Jenga style tower. So it's good for game night. And then I've got the 30-day confidence code program.
And we love both products. Thank you so much again for sharing those with us and bringing those to
Pleasure.
Denver when you came. Seriously, guys, check them out. You won't want to miss them. And also, we will include all of where you can find Natalie in our show notes. So don't worry about that as well. And Natalie, again, thank you so much for
Pleasure.
joining us.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much for having me.
of course. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Smarter Literacy Podcast. Make sure to subscribe for more strategies and insights to make delivering effective literacy instruction easy, or at least easier. And if you found this episode helpful, share it with a friend or leave a rating and review wherever you get your podcast. It really does help others find the show, and we are beyond grateful for your support. Thanks for listening. Until next time, happy teaching.